Test rugby in 2024 is over. Have we learned the answers or have we just found more questions? I'm here to answer that question, and I'm joined by the one and only Harry Jones. It is not the Lecker Rugby Pod, but I hope it will be a Lecker Rugby Pod. Harry, welcome.
How's it here? Good to be in your country, your town, your environs. I'm sitting here in London, and as you can see over my left shoulder, there is the bloody gherkin
Yeah,
right there.
you've managed to get it to pose nicely for you. Fortunately, we're recording a bit earlier than we would normally podcast, but thankfully the sun goes down very early this time of year, so it can be illuminated. I'm expecting to see a police helicopter fly over your shoulder at some point. Maybe looking for you, maybe looking for someone else. We won't go into that. But yeah, well, just before we get into talking about the specific questions, how do you rate 2024 as a year for Test rugby specifically? It's been a lot of drama, a lot of churn. Do you buy into this whole first year of the new cycle thing?
I mean, normally post World Cup, there's a bit of a doldrums. A lot of teams see their way clear during that year to do the rebuilding. They even say the word out loud. Some of them cannot. New Zealand's not allowed to say that, but they actually do some sort of rebuilding. And so typically that results in a lesser caliber tests. Sometimes there's some very anomalous outcomes. I don't think we got that this year. I think we got some very clever introduction of young players along with the spine of experience. And so teams like Ireland, even though there was some wobbles, or the French or the Box, and then at the end, New Zealand showed that they could introduce the newbies like Wallace Satiti or Sasha Feinberg, Zulu, and still produce. So that's interesting. I also thought that the age of parity, where you have four clear teams that are at the top, and then you have a group of from 5 to 8 that are, dogfight. It led to some really spectacular tests. But the final piece of it was that midway through the year, a change in emphasis by referees, which turns out is even more potent than changing laws or having experimental variations. If you just say, we're going to do something different, we're going to call obstruction and crossing more, we're going to have a clear path to the catcher, so that you can just blast him. You are not going to have sufficient box guards, so your box will be charged down more often. Things like that change the shape of a game in a hurry. And what's really funny, or maybe it's tragic, almost every one of those changes ends up with the teams wanting to kick more because that is the solution in a in a football code like rugby
Yeah,
football is that is usually the wind around it. So we saw some fantastic kick chase rugby. I mean, who didn't like seeing Louis Biari and
yeah.
his lightning feet? And that's all just graps. Arends Colby showed the way in the quarterfinal against the French. And you saw the French kind of going, okay, so maybe we have some Leckerbecks in
Yeah,
a mysteriously scrum-capped, swivel-hipped,
yeah.
extraordinarily strong and false wings. And then Scotland has some of those guys too. So the rise of the diminutive player in 2024, I thought was interesting. With supersized Manny Miafu, you also have these, really influential players that
I
are
do feel like
75
rugby.
kilograms.
We'll get into it with some of the teams. I do feel like rugby players are starting to get a bit smaller. I mean, I know we've got the Box, who obviously, are massive. Although, historically, I've pushed back on the narrative that South Africa's players are just massive because it's not, always strictly true. But when we get to some of the teams, particularly, I do feel like we are starting to see some teams go, actually, we're going to try this. And maybe size isn't what they're going for. They're going for slim down and fitness. So we'll talk about that when we get to some other teams. But might as well make a start then. So the plan is we are going to review 15 test nations in however long it takes us to do that. And we're going to do them in order of the World Rugby rankings. So we're going to, the good news is for the people who have clicked it on this video because of the thumbnail, which I haven't made yet, but will be the Springboks. We're going to start with the Springboks. So in order just to help the people who are scrolling through, looking for timestamps and things, I made a little thing. So South Africa, uh, 11 wins, 2 losses from their 13 games this season. So I've got a question for every single team, Harry, and I'm going to start the question. I'm going to start the segment on each team with the question. And the question that I have for South Africa is this. I asked earlier in the year, is it time that we compared the current Springboks to the 2015 All Blacks, and does that comparison matter? And you replied to me, no, it doesn't matter. Do you stand by that?
Um, I think you can compare them now, and there's a couple of reasons why. Traditionally, the Springboks have fallen off post World Cup win. And there was also that mysterious sort of feeling of maybe they're just going to experiment all year long. But that's not what happened. In the end, it came back to more of the core. You look at the high minutes players for the Box, there were the like the usual suspects, Damien Dialende, Jesse Creel,
Hmm.
Andre Pollard, some people that you wouldn't expect when you actually look at the minutes, you see that. So I think Rassie Erasmus and his new guys, Jerry Flannery and Tony Brown, insisted on playing for history and for legacy. So now I think we can. The the comparison's always been fair in the sense that who was playing in 2015 in the semifinal in the rain, and Twickenham lost by 2 points to the greatest All Black team in All Black history. Andre Pollard, Damon Dialende, Jesse Creel, Frans Malherbe, Peter Steph Toy, Eben Etzebeth, Lou de Jager, Willie LaRue. I mean, like the basic spine was picked by Heineke Meyer. And
Hmm.
so they were young. They were 20, 21 years old. And here they are still. Sia Kolisi was picked by Heineke Meyer. So you have this entire cohort. And if they lost by two in 2015, when they were 20 years old, 21 years old, is Jesse Creel better now? Yes, he is. Delende? Yes. Pollard? Yeah. Everyone's better. There's only one possible thing there. LaRue might be a little bit, aging now, but all the other teams, all the other players, you'd say they're better. Plus, you'd say, were their stand-ins better? Is it is Malcolm Marks better than the backup hooker in 2015? Yes, of course. So you actually look at it and you have to say, this is the only real competitor to the All Blacks 2015 team. And when I did a cross selection, even the Kiwis were saying it's close. It's either 8-7 or 7-8 when you look at the players now across. And
Yeah.
before 2 years ago, you would say, that's ridiculous. How dare you compare anybody, like Jesse Creel to Conrad Smith? That's insane. Or Sonny Bill Williams. And so now you actually say, no, actually, it's close. It's close at every position except for maybe Dan Carter still has the wood over Andre Pollard.
Hmm. I think the one thing that this Springbok team has that I can't remember seeing any other team having to this scale is the depth.
Yeah,
It's just
yeah.
absolutely ridiculous. I said on a podcast that South Africa are the only nation currently playing a 23-man game. I feel like they're playing a 36-man game, honestly. It's the Razzie said it right at the beginning of the year. I think even before the Ireland test, he said the one thing that he can't complain about is talent coming through. And he's right about that. It's like it's if you look at like Damien Willemse hasn't played a game for the Springboks this season. That's how crazy their depth is.
At fullback, you could say Fassi, Feinberg, Mngozulu, Willemse, and LaRue is a foursome. At number 9, you could say Faf de Klerk, Grant Williams, Kubus Reinach, and Jaden Hendrickse. And you don't really know, in those two positions at least, what the depth chart is. In the other ones, you do. My point is, though, at positions like 9 and 10 and 15, which are classic playmaker, game manager positions, what the Bucks have done is loaded it up. So if you were comparing the All Blacks 2015 era to this current one, maybe top line you'd still go All Blacks, but on the weakest 5 players in the 23 or the weakest 3 players in the 34, you'd go Bucks because there's no drop off. Where it's a tremendous drop off from Dan Carter to the next.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. I completely agree with that. Mind you, in the 2015 final, it was Bodie Barrett on the bench, and he turned out to be okay. So
Yeah, not bad. There's actually some very long history between these two groups, which is actually fascinating.
it
More of
is.
the All Blacks have cycled out, but still, there's a lot of overlap there.
Yeah.
On South Africa, I actually met a person, an academic once, who told me about Russia and said she told me that every big decision in Russia is made in a banya, in the sweat house, where families and dignitaries and mayors and Politburo all go with their
Oh
towels
yeah, like the
and
public bath type
they
thing.
just go there, and that's where all decisions are made. In South Africa, that's the braai. So all big decisions are made at the braai. It's a long process. I think this year has been one long braai. I think that's what it's been, and it's been a national celebration. The fears that there'll be this fall off the cliff, get found out, get caught by the All Blacks, and to go 4-0. I mean, have a streak of four. I mean, against the All Blacks, and now next year's clash at Eden
Yeah.
Park is
Oh yes.
massive. So I think they did well. Two kicks away from going perfect. A kick missed and a kick made. And so I think, they would have tick all the boxes, and probably if there's one thing just to sort of quibble, the lineout was a bit shaky at times. And that happens when you have so many different lineout callers, probably.
Probably. I thought it was a shame that Ruben Nokia got injured for the autumn test because I felt he
Yeah.
was making that number 5 jersey his own to some extent. So of course, Springbok locks, the depth is there. One of my favourite stats about the Springboks this year is that the man who was involved in the most match day 23s, as far as I'm aware, was Vincent Koch, and he only
Yeah,
started one game.
Mr. Incredible.
Yeah, yeah. So and Oxen I think was the second most. Obviously, he missed the last game against Wales, but yeah, like I said, the thing about South Africa is the depth. So moving on to number 2 then, Ireland. So Ireland's record this year was 8-3. The three being a loss in Twickenham, a loss in Pretoria, and a loss at home to the All Blacks. Which on paper you go, they're not disasters to lose. They're losable games. They're games that you would have been worried about losing beforehand. But my question about Ireland is this: why are Irish rugby fans so frustrated with this team? Because they're still winning, they're still good, they are still number 2 in the world, and they're number 2 behind what we've just said could be the greatest team of all time. So, where's this frustration coming from with Ireland fans?
Yeah, so I think maybe they're new to the idea of being front runners. This is the greatest sports team in Ireland's history of any sport. They got caught up in it. They have had some really cruel exits from World Cups. And I think there's this kind of gnawing sensation that maybe this is really a time period where they have to produce. And it seems to be running by. I always become literary on your pod, and so the
That's why I
poet,
bring you on.
the great poet W. B. Yeats asked this question: did all old men and women, rich and poor, who trod upon those rocks and passed his door, whether in public or in secret rage, as I do now against old age? And I was sitting in the Aviva watching Ireland tried to get revenge against the All Blacks. And the city was there with banners everywhere saying revenge is a dish best cold served. It was all kinds of revenge motif. The whole city, Dublin had turned into a revenge town. And they got beaten quite comfortably. And there was this moment in time where the bench came on, and you thought, okay, so nowadays you think you have to have some kind of big impact, and it was Peter O'Mahony, great player, but more great than you and I put together. Ian Henderson, Connor Murray, and Cian Healy. That just doesn't spell impact. That's not a bomb squad. That's a nursing home squad. So
Mm.
I think that's what Ireland is worried about is with all the life in the tens, young tens, the dynamic, there's this idea that the pack and the decision making just seems a little bit predictable. And the three losses that you refer to, there were the similarities. All the teams just mucked the ruck. They just realized all we got to do, because Ireland has a very good defensive ruck, but they cannot clean these rucks the way they used to with the roll. And when you're shorn of the crocodile roll, or even the semblance of a roll, you just have to have really strong bodies coming in there. And it's not a sport for old men when you're cleaning that low and that hard against. So, more Joe McCarthy's, smarter Joe McCarthy's, who I think struggles with his rugby IQ sometimes. But that's what needs to happen. And so I just felt this kind of underwhelming groan when the bomb squad came on to get revenge against the All Blacks, and everyone was, you know, 36 years old. It didn't seem likely, and sure enough, it wasn't likely at all. And I think the All Blacks, um, I've never seen a team happier to beat Ireland than the All Blacks in Dublin that night.
Hmm.
It shone all over them. Razor was, beaming, and you could just see that they were relieved. So I suppose my answer to you is that's why it's in reverse. I think it was so galling for Ireland to lose that match. Like it was they're at the point now where they don't mind losing to the Box as much as they hate losing to New Zealand.
Yeah, I think. By the way, if WB Yates isn't enough to get you to like the video and subscribe to the channel, I don't know what is. So please consider doing so and tell a friend. But I think I've got a point of view which is like, oh, it's not as bad as everyone's making out, and then I've got a point of view which is like, it might be a little bit worse. With so I spoke to someone who said, look, Ireland's got a new attack coach, and the big kind of narrative of the autumn was, "Ooh, what's going on with this attack?" Apart from the rotation, which I'll come to in a moment. What's going on with this attack? And I spoke to a coach who said, look, I know how Ireland does their training sessions, and this new attack coach is coming in, and I can tell that he's spending the vast, vast, vast majority of his time on starter plays, so on set piece moves, on first phase moves, and things. So, I can see the intricacies of these moves, and in order for them to be that intricate, they must be spending such a huge amount of time on them that kind of from Ruck 5 onwards, they're probably not spending that much time on it. So they're maybe relying on what they did with the old coach. So I would say, maybe chill out about the attack at the moment, give it another season to get it in. Remember, Ireland don't play nearly as many games as the likes of the All Blacks and things. They normally only play 10, 11 games a season. But
Yeah,
go on, sorry.
well, I think that's animating them right now, the All Black rivalry. And so you can have a team in any team sport, you can have a pretty good, that's a good season, 8-3. But if the loss comes to the wrong one, like, Liverpool, Everton, or there's a derby
Yes.
almost feeling between the two teams. And I think every team has one of those where they just cannot stand losing. And I think that's what
England.
that's what went on between Ireland and New Zealand. And it's deeply rooted in Soldier Field. It's and then the revenge in Dublin. It's rooted in the series in New Zealand and some of the banter, and then the quarterfinal exit. So probably at this point, nothing will do except to beat New Zealand. And then I would say, and you would say that that's a pretty good season. I think we found some players that stepped up.
Hmm.
I particularly thought a lot of their playmakers, their game managers. There's a lot of riches there. I don't know if Frawley's the thing, or Crowley's the thing, or Pendergast's the thing, but that's a lot of material, and a lot of other teams would love to have 3 or 4 guys like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And because they're coming from a small number of clubs, it means the cohesion. I remember ah the guy from Gainline Analytics. I love him. He's slipped my mind.
Ben Darwin.
Ben Darwin, yes, thank you. Said that there's no, at least back if you go back to the World Cup, there was no bad decision in terms of the half-back pairing. You either pick Sexton and Murray, who have played with each other forever, Sexton and Jameson Gibson Park, who are club teammates, or Crowley and Murray, who are club teammates. So there's you can't get it wrong. It's an unmess upable selection. Now, obviously, Sexton's gone now, but they'll get back there, I'm sure. But talking about where Ireland's, there are signs that this is a golden era rather than a dynasty being built here. My advice
Yeah.
always as a Wales fan to Ireland fans who are maybe starting to grumble a little bit because, let's be honest, Ireland in the last 12 months have had a lot of opportunities to make history, whether it be the first Ireland team to win a World Cup quarterfinal, first team ever to win back-to-back Grand Slams, or you can go to like at Leinster's level where they didn't win the URC, didn't win the Champions Cup. So they've had a lot of opportunities missed in the last 12 months. But as a Wales fan, I would say sing when you're winning, celebrate it while it's good, because, like you said, the team is aging, and if you look at the players who are coming through, you've got the Leinster Academy players, and then you've got, if you look at who's coming from Connacht, we love these players, but they qualified to play for Ireland on residency, and we've seen that in some of the other provinces as well. And now with that residency rule changing, going to 5 years, they're not going to be able to replace those players as easily. So it is looking a bit like what happened to Wales in terms of our golden generation ending quite abruptly. There is a risk of that happening. And I don't think necessarily it should be blamed at Andy Farrell if that does happen. You can only pick the players that are available to be picked. And, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't with rotation, because if you rotate a lot and you lose, then you're the bad guy. If you don't rotate at all and you win, you're also the bad guy. So that's how it goes. But, you know,
Yeah, and they've chosen to play with intricacy. And the thing about intricacy on attack is defensive coaches just sit there, ponder, fumigate, ruminate, meditate, and they can catch you. And so if your system is built on every single carrier or putative carrier looking like he's about to take the ball, and they all pretend exactly like that, but over time that wears on you. It's a lot of work to be James Ryan steaming to the line and not getting the ball, but pretending he is going to get the ball. Ty Furlong, same thing. Defensive systems just tackle everyone now. I mean, they don't end up finishing the tackle, but they know now to go to everyone. So the surprise factor of Ireland's over. And it's true they might end up being sort of the Jim Furyk of rugby, which is that they make a lot of money, good rankings, but don't win the Grand Slams, don't win the majors. If you look
mm,
at the World Cup as the major and the Six Nations as a good tournament, but not the one that defines, yeah, that might be. And what I just said, that's the best team that Ireland has ever had of any sport, of any team sport in history. It's kind of hard to complain about that. And yet
yeah.
that's the job of the fan, is to complain. So I totally get it, because it just feels like, 1 point away, one, Sam Whitelock steal away, and maybe so.
Yeah, absolutely. Next team then is the All Blacks, the famous All Blacks from New Zealand. 10-4 for the All Blacks this season, which at times you would have thought it was worse, the way that the vibes were going. So my question on the All Blacks is this. 14 games is the same as a regular season in Super Rugby that Razor has now had. He's essentially had a Super Rugby season with this national side. Is the jury still out, or does the case have enough evidence to convict, or what's the opposite of convict? Not convict Razor. Do we have
Quit.
a
Yeah.
verdict?
Uh, well, I do think it takes a season for a club coach who's never been anything other than a club coach. I don't think he's ever even been an assistant at test level. The lack of time that you have, so the efficacy of your coaching, sort of the Joe Schmidt thing, where you every second is accounted for and every practice is scripted. Razor's kind of more of a let's get to know you, let's roast a
Mm,
pig on the fire and have some fun. It takes him a while. I also think he misjudged and underestimated some of his competition. The loss to Argentina is the big black mark of this season. It makes the season bad no matter what. So it can never be an A. It's probably a B minus. Um, but I looked at the slogan of New Zealand in the past 40, 50 years ago. It was onward. Uh, and New Zealand, I think, has moved onward. I think if you park that loss to Argentina, as shameful as unforgivable it is, because it sits now in the annals of All Black shame. From that point on, even the losses to the Box, and the loss to the French, you can fathom it. It does look like the thing is going onward. And so I think Razor has found his groove. He's found his mojo. He did make some choices. We shouldn't just say that he's a front runner coach. He picked Wallace Atiti, and everyone else said, including I did, it was Satutu. He picked the wrong
yeah.
guy, and that he picked the right guy. So let's give him some credit there. He did find some things towards the end. Artie was playing in his more natural position, and I thought that worked. There were some moments where you figured out that he has basis of a pack. Their front rows are now fearsome, and he plays them longer than the Bucks do. So I
Mm,
think Razor's building something that's akin to the Crusader version at a test level. It's kind of old school. It's not innovative. He stands alone almost in doing almost throwback rugby. But it wasn't enough in the beginning, and I think he realized that. I think he's also the kind of guy. that when he gets stung or beaten, he goes back to the well, he goes back to his roots. I think that kind of hurt him actually in the two Bok losses. I think if he had done something different, it might have helped him. It was too same old, same old. But when they caught Ireland, that looked like a winning formula. And it not only did it look confident, it looked like they could keep doing that for a while.
But they played differently in that game, didn't they? I
Yeah,
mean,
they did.
they were happy to win that game by kicking 3 pointers, which is not how they approached any other game this season. So was that a mental? I always find it fascinating when teams accept the underdog thing. You know, it's such a cliche in sport of we prefer being the underdog, and you're the All Blacks, you can never be the underdog. But there was something about the mentality that they went into that game which was different, which made it their best game of the season. And I kind of feel like there is some kind of mental gymnastics going on with the All Blacks because their best attribute, in my opinion, is their scrum. It's
Yeah,
phenomenal.
it's
Uh,
incredible. Yeah.
but they're like, no, we are not the Springboks, we are the All Blacks. So we therefore must throw the ball around. And we've seen all season them just playing 15, 20 phases in the middle of the pitch, sometimes in their own half. And you're like, please, someone, for goodness sake, kick the ball. And like they don't kick off nine at all, well, hardly ever. They kick, if they do kick, it's off 10. And just, I feel the issues that we did see in that Argentina loss, I'm not sure they've all been fixed. I've got to be honest. I see a lot of them still in place, particularly the overplaying is
Yeah.
one, and just the refusal to win ugly. They have to win by scoring the best tries you've ever seen all the time.
Yeah, and they don't have enough carriers who can go from standing start or stopping power either. They don't have the actual artillery that the French and the Boks have on that. So if you're going to do that, then you need to have a much higher percentage of gain line. You need to have much better yards post contact. Um, that they were pretty poor actually, and they didn't have punch from 12. They didn't have punch if you carry Sam Kane. You don't have a real carrier there. And so I think in the end, they are fixable, but it's going to require saying goodbye to a few people. And also, it might be that Razor is kind of a slow decider. I'm not going to say slow thinker, but he's one of those people that actually needs a body of work and that he'll go back and he'll look at it all. I know he will stay up all night doing it. He's that kind of coach as well. And I think they will move onward. And I think there's a part of me that thinks Razor almost wanted to show New Zealand, which is a very testy, difficult public to please. Kind of like, I kind of did that, so it didn't work. So now we're going to do something else.
He has to do something else though, and it did. Another slight kind of red flag is overstating it for me is that the things that he did to which caused improvement are kind of things that people said he should have been doing from day one, such as playing Satiti and Surveyor the other way around, such
Right,
as
right.
not playing DMAC at 10, such as what the at times confused selection he had with the back three. These are things that initially people said from the first team sheet of the year against England, not sure this is the right answer here, Razor. And he was stubborn with DMAC. He did keep playing
Yeah.
DMAC, and a lot of people said they should put Bodie at 10 and put DMAC back to 15. And he was, nope, that's not what I'm doing. That's not what I'm about. So if I cast you in the role of Razor's defense attorney, do, how do you excuse that?
Um, so we all want to think that we can know something before we see it, but the scientific method and true, rigor requires that you see it. And whether we like it or not, an off year, the year post World Cup, is your year to do some experimentation. He also was hamstrung in that he is one of the teams that's not allowed to use overseas players. And he had a ready made solution for everything you've just said overseas. And he wasn't allowed to do it. So he might also be doing a long argument because I know he's gone back 3 times to the board and said, see, I need Richie Mo'unga. Um, I need more grunt at blindside. I need a different loose trio. So he has solutions that are right there in Japan, easy, ready to go, fit.
But
So
they've chosen not to be available for him. They knew the rules and they've
I
chosen to
know,
go.
I know, but it's interesting that every single time he goes to the board, that's topic one. And so I think we're looking at a stubborn person. So if he's my client, my client's stubborn, and he's stubborn in loss and in victory. And and that's why we won. I would say that's why we won in Dublin, is he stuck to his guns, and then he made a tactical tweak for that game because he knew the ref better. Nick Berry was well known to the New Zealanders, and he mystified the Irish. You could just tell they just did not know what was going on in that game on the ruck.
Yeah. Fascinating. I think the Super Rugby next season is going to be absolutely fascinating, and there's a level of intrigue in Southern Hemisphere rugby now that there hasn't been for a while, purely because the All Blacks were so dominant, especially in between World Cups. So definitely the Razor one is a storyline that season two is well worth a watch, I think. So
Yeah,
the next team then is going to be France. So you said they were a clear top four, but France have had a very strange season. They were very iffy, shall we say. We did a Six Nations review together and we said that we agreed that they weren't good. They then obviously do what they always do, which is send the B team on tour in the summer. And then in the autumn, they only really had two tests. They had a game against Japan, which was an uncompetitive fixture, and then they had the All Blacks in Argentina, and they won both of those games. 7-2 is their record. They actually have a draw in there, which I couldn't be bothered to amend the graphic to reflect. They had a draw against Italy. With France and with the next two or three teams, it's going to be essentially the same question. Are they good?
they are good, and they suffered worse from the World Cup than the Irish did. The Irish came out of the World Cup holding some speed. They toured really well in South Africa, and then they kind of fell off towards the end. The French are the opposite. They were stewing. There was emotions. There was apparently deep anguish, soul searching. They had the horrific, and we shouldn't make light of it, tour of Argentina. And then they finished in a burst of glory, not just the stage setting of the incredible haka and the lights and the perfection, but beating the All Blacks in a really tasty test. I would say, the French always have to say everything differently than everyone else. So the way they say, do not let the perfect be the enemy of the good, is they say progrès plutôt que perfection. So basically progress, not perfection. I think you could say from month one to month 12 of this year that the French were actually one of the risers. And it's a could have been thing, like why don't they play those people all the time? And okay, that's just the way that's just the French. So we wish they would do something different when they tour New Zealand. But the thinking there is, I think you look at it and say, honestly, with their age profile, with their stack depth, they are a problem in 2027 for everyone else. Because when they get it together and they have enough depth now to say that they could do that on loose forwards, tight forwards, they have just a drove of people they can put in there. Ramos was actually, I thought, one of the players of the autumn.
Yep.
And so it wasn't just Dupont. I've always made fun of the idea of being too dependent. Thomas really took them out of that. I thought he was driving the team. I thought he was the brain of the team. And there were times when Roy Gard and those guys could frustrate Dupont, but Ramos is just really good at seeing the game, and he does surprising things. But no, I think the French can look at this year and say, this shows us how good we could be. Was it a great season? No, but it just felt like a trend line that they could ride.
I think so. And I think that by the All Blacks game, and particularly in the Argentina game as well, they're a team playing with identity. And this is kind of referring what I was saying earlier about teams going, no, I'm going to do something different. And the France, I think, are happy to be a team that plays without the ball. Especially we saw that in the New Zealand game where they made 200 plus tackles and less than 100 carries, I think it was. And like you said, they get the lacquer backs in. I think, we just debated Razor at length in the last section. I think Galtier has finished 2024 with the right to say, I told you so. I think he's been vindicated because I was one of the people who said, how dare you pick Thomas Ramos at 10 when Mathieu Jalibert is right there? I'm a UBB fan, obviously, our mutual friend Maz, massive fans of Jalibert, and he has been unbelievable in the top 14 this
Yeah.
season. So to not pick him was a huge call, and he was proven right. And he was proven right. And that dependence on the Toulouse core that he was willing to move away from it. He was willing to bring in a fullback from Stade Francais who have been terrible. And he's been willing to bring in a centre from Po or what have you and say, no, I'm going to pick these guys. And everyone said, I can't see what you're doing here, Gautier. And he's finished the season going, you should have trusted me. So definitely one of the winners of 2024 for me in the end after a bad Six Nations.
Yeah, and when they have all their people together and they're playing at the top level, they finish well. All Blacks struggle the whole season was that they did not finish games very well. Their point scoring, the final quarter was really down. The French can just keep scoring, and so that's coaches love that. Just the idea that just every 5, 6 minutes, some points get on the board by 3, by 5, by 7. Other thing is the rule emphasis changes on the lack of escorts, guards, shepherds, whatever you call them really helped France, really helped South Africa. I mean, if you allow, three guys, you have a Olivon and a Lackerback for the French, Liqueurback, and and then just some sort of jackler in there, Crow or something. That's devastating when no one can bar you, when no one's allowed to step across, no one's allowed to. So you have the ability with the high kicks that Dupont and Ramos can put up there, the hang time, you can get three there, one for the spill, one for the scraps behind the ball. You go beyond the catcher, one right in front, waiting for the jackal if he comes down, and one just to murder you, just whoever your Crow or Etzebeth. And so I don't know if they're gonna think about that again because it certainly was some of the most amazing collisions, not in the air, but they just wait for the person to land.
Yeah, yeah. And of course, the most important thing is that they won the sevens at the Olympics, which I know is something that you're very passionate about.
I have no comment on that. I just don't even want to talk about it.
But if you do love French rugby, I just want to make everyone aware that there is an audio version. The link will be in the description down below for those on YouTube of a new French rugby podcast that I do on my audio format with the aforementioned friend Madame Maz. It's half an hour long. It does the top 14 only, apart from in Europe, somewhere we talk about only the top 14 teams in Europe. And it's been going really well, and I think people would really enjoy it. So check it out if you haven't already. Next team, Harry, is Los Pumas. Now I'm going to show you the graphic for Los Pumas, and I think something's going to surprise you. 6-6 for Los Pumas in 2024. I think the game against Uruguay might not be counted in that. I don't know whether that was counted as a full test in the particular app that I was using. I'm not making my opinion about whether it was a full test, but when I counted, it was 6-6. It felt this year at times felt like the arrival of Los Pumas, and at times this year it felt like the same old Los Pumas. What are you saying about them?
Yeah, so it's difficult to frame this, and you have to as you get below the top four. So Argentina always lost to the same team that they won, so it's like they split. They split a bunch of things. The French, All Blacks, Springboks, Wallaby. So it doesn't really surprise when you start thinking about that. Like, oh, okay, so it was kind of even, even, even. It was the manner in which they won. It was the gravity and weight of those victories, and it was also the almost loss, in Dublin where if it was a knockout, you think they would have probably gone for the drop goal. They just wanted to win, because it
Hmm.
was not, there's no friendlies in rugby, but there was sort of friendly. But I think it was the fact that they were able to beat such a collection. The scalps were incredible for the year. And there was also a spirit that I saw. Czech had come in and kind of like let's make everyone more accountable, which is good because Argentina was not accountable. They were way too much on the highlights and not enough focused on the lowlights and why they were losing. You listen to the Argentinian anthem. What does it say? What do they sing when they're crying and that big beat up? They sing, "What did we know how to achieve? Swims of glory, let's live. Nados de gloria vivamos. Let's live, or let us swear with glory to die. And I think that that's what Contepomi brought back with Malia, Chocobara, Sinti, the way they were dashing around, it was electric.
It was
The
fantastic to watch.
and they avoided some of the doldrums. So if you did beat them, you had to work it. The Blacks put them away, I think, pretty badly at that one. And then the All Blacks did their revenge thing. But for the most part, they were tough to beat. You couldn't just catch them on an off day and roll up a score. You had to, the Wallabies, that was almost a miracle. Ireland acted like they had won the World Cup when they got out of jail. When the knock on happened and no one really saw it. And okay, we're done. Because the Pumas were driving. They were building phases, and it didn't look like there was a damn thing that Ireland could do about it, actually, besides infringe.
They're unbelievably fit, aren't they? Their
Yeah, so
cardio is unreal.
I think they are a handful. Now they were in that group, so they end up sitting above. I guess the reason why it's a good season is they end up sitting above Scotland and England. If you're Argentina, you take that many scalps and you end the year number 5 in the world. That's a great year. Just historically, that is a very good year, and it doesn't look like they are done. It looks like with their Albornoz, with some of the shape that they have
How
around their
good is
attack,
he, by the way?
eh, and people that were missing. I mean, like Emiliano Boffelli wasn't even there. They have people that can bring back to that thing. No, it was good. I thought the loose forwards are the real story there, that they can just throw guys at you that we haven't even heard of before, and they're just amazing.
Oviedo was amazing.
Yeah, just 23 years old, and he's Juan Martin Gonzalez is pretty much untackleable when he has a head of steam. You have Matera, you have Kramer, who's everyone's worst nightmare. You have all these players that can just keep throwing at you. So, if they could just find a prop or two, they'll be all right.
Yeah, yeah. How big is the DNA change? Because I've been on podcasts before where you said, what is the DNA of each country? And they said, Argentina, it's the forwards, it's the scrum. That's what we grew up knowing of Argentina. They're not that anymore. Is that a problem? Do nations, and I feel like asking a South African this is the perfect person to ask, do you always revert to your DNA?
Under pressure, you do. So when it comes down to the real crunch, the semifinal of a World Cup, you do. The decider in the Six Nations, um, you know, you end up having to go there because you have 13, 14, 15 years of all your coaches' words in your ears, and your village, your town, your club, your province, your school, that there's just certain things you do. And I think that is also, by the way, why Ireland has a hard time getting over that hurdle, because they just keep trying to make more and more intricate attacks until they just run out of steam. So Argentina needs to find that grit in the scrum, because even though there's less scrums and there's less resets now that are able to be scrummed again, the percentage of scrums when something goes wrong that get pinged is still very high. And it's the easiest way you'll ever get into someone else's 22. It's the easiest way you'll exit your own 22. It requires no effort. You trudge to the line out 45 meters and you set up a starter play. So they're just playing with one hand behind their back because of their scrum frailty.
Yes, yeah, but I do love watching them. Arguably the best team to watch in Test rugby at the moment for me. Okay, so next team is Scotland. So it's the Scotland Argentina. I don't know if it's a rivalry, but the competition for sixth spot in the world rankings is one to watch because of the new 2014 World Cup. The sixth ranked team is top seed. So it does matter being sixth. At the moment, Scotland is seventh, 9-4. Now, whether you want to say that's padded because of their summer tour, they did play a lot of tier two nations as they used to be known. Again, this is I think the final of the are they good teams.
Scotland is good in phases, good in flashes, and they bring a lot of smoke, but sometimes not enough fire. There's a saying in Scotland, "Lang may your lum reek," which is apparently "Long may your chimney smoke." And I just feel like sometimes there's just a smoke that comes out forever, and you keep waiting for the fire, and you never find it. On the plus side, we're post-Hog era, and apparently he had to have been a toxic figure in that camp. There's no way you can play around a guy like that guy who's so lousy. Blair Kinghorn is the very opposite. Breath of fresh air. He's obvious. Everyone in top 14 loves the guy.
Mhm.
He's inartful, guileless. He's just an innocent abroad. He's loving life. And so there are these exchanges. The midfield, I would say, is running as hot and well. Tupelotu and Hugh and Jones are really playing top level. So it complements Finn Russell. He has somewhere to go with the ball. It's not just having to make something out of nothing, which means Finn doesn't press too hard. He plays proper rugby. The whole back line, you could look at it and say, that's a lot of smoke. They could bring the smoke. But then you see these matches where they just get muscled. And yeah, so that's what happened. Gregor Townsend said the best match that he saw Scotland play was the loss against the Box, which is interesting. I don't know if he was being rhetorical or trying to make a point.
That's the kind of thing that coaches say. That I've heard a lot of coaches say things like that. Is sometimes their worst defeat, they say it's the best we played, and I kind of see it, and sometimes I kind of don't.
Maybe they have internal metrics
Yeah,
and they hit those, and so, but the fact of that matter was it was just like the quarterfinal in Marseille in that they stymied the Scottish attack. And if a team is so reliant on scoring so many points like Scotland is, and you can stem that, just you can just make the fire into smoke, they lose. And then you saw Australia try to do the same thing, and it failed miserably. And Scotland was the one who went away. So they are correctly ranked. They're in that slot between 5 and 7. They will vacillate. They'll be 5. They'll be 6. They'll be 7. Don't see any reason why they're ever going to 4 at this point because they don't have the muscle pack deep in games to be able to. Their locks, I think, are just substandard compared to the other locks.
interesting. Next team is your friend and mine, England. Now, I'll let you go first. If English rugby has no haters, I am dead. So 5 and 7 for England. But as we know, the RFU like to just blend the women's results in there and say everything's fine. So the thing that we keep getting told about England is that they're progressing, they're on a path. This is a new England. What's your assessment of that? Are England en route to the promised land, to Jerusalem, if you will?
Well, Hugh, come on. If you take out the 2 losses to New Zealand, it was even. That's what the RFU, their actual report said, which is amazing. No, listen, I'm going to go to the great English poet Mick Jagger, who said anything worth doing is worth overdoing. Um, Steve Borthwick says the same things every single time. Try harder. We're on a journey. We're close. The way they lost, even if you don't like England, and I like to see them lose, it started to become actually a little bit painful to watch for individual players, like a Jamie George. I go, wow, that must be really old to go to every press conference and have exactly the same. Like you just put it on a loop, Groundhog Day, and Marcus Smith not given the opportunity to finish a game and actually just get it over the line. You wonder what that would have happened. But they just kept doing the same things. It was so rote. And whilst that I think worked in the World Cup, because in the World Cup, I think you just have to really commit to a mission, stick to your guns, and then become the best you can possibly be at that. I think when you're playing such different styles, Six Nations, going to New Zealand, and then the Autumn Nations with a whole different strategic, tactical shifts, it didn't stand up. Apparently, Borthwick was livid about the late change when they said we're not going to allow you to have escorts on the catches. Apparently, that was a big thing to him and thought it was unfair.
Mm.
He also decried lack of fitness, which made no sense to me because he has control now by contract over a number of like I don't know 20 players or something,
But
17
he's
players.
allowed to have 32 players, but he's only given out 25 contracts.
Yeah, so I felt like there was just something wrong. I'll say this: there's something weird when so many assistant coaches don't want to coach with you anymore. I'm not accusing Steve Borthwick of being toxic or a bad guy, but there's other coaches like Farrell and Erasmus that people want to coach with. They'll go in a second. So
Mm.
there's something wrong there, and it's kind of fun to watch.
My question for England is, who are you? What are you? Because in England's head, even when they weren't that team, they were always that team. They always believed in themselves. No, we're that team, even when they really weren't. And if you look at their historical results since 2003, they have never been that team. But they always believed that they were. And now they're becoming brave losers. They say, you get Jamie George coming out after record losses at home to Ireland and saying, I'm proud of the effort there. Or you get the coach, or multiple players, or even the pundits and the public saying, we've done well to achieve that scoreline against that opposition. I'm like, you're playing at Twickenham. Any defeat at Twickenham is a failure. The Twickenham factor is a massive thing, and it helps you. And we're now seeing, like in the Premiership, we're seeing the might of Leicester Tigers going to Bordeaux, taking 40 points, and people saying, "Oh, they did well. They did well." Is this what England are now? Is this what they are? And you've got a Premiership which is in no way preparing players for test level. The way that the teams in the Premiership are playing is opposed to England's traditional DNA, and you've got just nothing feels like it's pulling in the same direction for England. And you had the whole thing with Felix Jones. This whole year was supposed to be about England's defense, getting this amazing World Cup winning defense. They bought it, they got the receipt, and they lost it. It went away. So that's my question for England is who are you? What's your identity as a team? Are you that team? Because I don't feel like England believe that they are at this moment.
Oh, they clearly do not. So we would say the number one facet that is lacking is self-belief, confidence. They are finding ways to lose. You can see it on their faces. You can feel the vibe when it's down to 10 minutes, 7 minutes, 5 minutes. You go, they'll find a way to lose. That's where they are right now. Now, the budget, it's so gargantuan compared to South Africa or Australia that it just becomes inconceivable that you couldn't do better.
But what is that money
Um,
being spent on?
I
Because
don't know. They're
because they
just
don't own their clubs, they
yeah.
don't contract their players, apart from a small handful as we referred to. So that extra 50 million, 100 million that they have against their competitors, where's that money going?
Yeah, it's 50 million against their closest competitor. So imagine what it is against South Africa or Italy or something. So yeah, it doesn't make any sense to me that now they go out on the field, even at their home ground, and they're not prohibitive favorites against anybody. I mean, you even think a team like Italy or Argentina is kind of right there, the bounce of the ball. So swagger's gone. And now you look across the team and you see players that are really good. Maro Itoje, Marcus Smith on his day. They can really play. And some of the young talents in the wings is extremely athletic. Um, I suppose you have to look at coaching at that point. It doesn't make any sense. So it's stewardship, not using the money well, wasting profligacy. Maybe there's too many consultants doing nothing. Maybe the
Mm,
analytics are way off, but they are getting far away from their DNA. And I agree with you, it's not going to work. It's not going to work because they cannot blitz better than the real blitz teams. So they're just going to always be second best.
yeah. Next team. Now that this is for me, the most interesting narrative in 2025 is Australia. So my question on Australia for you is this, and this is the one I was most excited to ask you. Which changes most? Does Australia continue to become Schmidtified, or does Schmidt need to become Australiaified in 2025?
Oh, that's a good question. Schmidt will have to do more adjustment. I think the players and the groups and his provincial sides have done what they're going to do, and that's about as much as they can stretch into quick ruck cleaning, lifted. Um, but the moments that made everyone sit up and notice the Wallabies were Flickatow. They were
Yeah.
Suwali. They were doing non-Schmidt things. They were offloading at will, and that is clearly not something he espouses. And he has always stood against it. And he always says focused on the
That
botched
that that
offload.
was the thing for me against England when Suaalii was doing those offloads when Ikitau did that offload. I thought, great, that's more Australia than Schmidt though. So
Yeah,
what's going on there?
I think that's where I think he. Speaking of experimentation, I think Joe Schmidt really did run an experiment, and his background in academia helped him because I think he came to an answer, and he said, "I'm going to have to do something different here. These guys cannot do the Schmidt ball well enough to ever get to top four. I mean, we'll just be stuck. We'll be Scotland. Um, but if we could incorporate some of that flash." And if I, as an older man, Joe might think, can kind of embrace that, learn a few new tricks, not be so stern and gruff when things go wrong, but let things play out. They do have those players. And that's what they have. A Tom Wright can do some weird stuff that you go, no, 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 yes. Like
Yeah.
bad play, bad. Oh, yeah. And so I think that's where they have to be. And a little bit like Argentina in a way. I do think Joe has signaled that he's having more fun. Maybe there's pressure off him. Maybe the Ireland job, was his first big test job, and then he comes back to New Zealand and that's a pressure cooker. I mean, look, the Wallabies, Australia had a prime minister. His name was Harold Holt. He was a prime minister. In 1967, he went for a swim, and he was never seen, credibly, again. And that's how 2023 felt. And then the prime minister of rugby, Eddie, was gone. And no one's ever seen him credible again. I feel like whoever was the prime minister post Harold Holt probably had, a pretty easy swim of it. So I think Joe Schmidt had the cushiest ride in 2024 of any coach. And maybe it allowed him to, in the wake of that incredible, scandalous, weird, just preposterously stupid year of Eddie Jones with the Wallabies, maybe it gave Joe Schmidt this ability to just play around a little bit more. And but I think his first experiment was, I'm only going to play local players. I'm resisting overseas players. He actually graded guys like Jeremy Williams really well. He figured out what Jeremy Williams was. It always reflects to the Arnold brothers and Skelton. And then he found some magic in the back line. He couldn't think of two more opposite people than Tom Wright and Joe Schmidt.
Yeah.
And you would almost think that Tom Wright was Eddie Jones's kind of guy, but they hated each other and they didn't play together. And he didn't pick him. He axed him. And so now you have this weird thing where in his latter years, Joe Schmidt's got some pet projects, and he dropped a guy who'd never played any Super Rugby, Joseph Akusu Suali'i, into the
Mhm.
cauldron, and it worked out. So, I could just see Joe almost kind of going, "Well, maybe I should have done some more of that earlier in my career."
Yeah. Like I said, it's the storyline I'm most looking forward to in 2025 is where Schmidt takes these Wallabies. And I have to say that I never didn't rate Schmidt. I always thought he was fantastic, but I really have enjoyed watching him go about his business this year. Okay, we're getting into some of the lower ranked teams now. So, well, we're still in the top 10, but Fiji, I feel like they weren't as good this year as they were last year. Yes, they got the result against Wales. I felt like Mick Burke kind of struggled with the do I just pick the Drua or do I bring in all the European names? And there were some games where he picked all the European names and it looked like old Fiji. Uh, what was your feeling on Fiji this year? Yeah, yes, they got, 7-3, but obviously the Pacific Nations Cup helps that ratio. What's your take on Fiji?
There is a saying in Fiji, "Sega na laka," which appeals to me because it sounds like laka, but it's laka. And it is translated "no worries." And I felt like Fiji is not worried about this year. I think they booked it, they made some cash here and there, they got some experience. It was obviously largely successful, but um, I think they're just steadily building more continuity, cohesiveness, and yeah, they're not worried about it. I didn't feel like any of the matches they played, besides the cup where they had to win that cup. All the other ones they just didn't seem to be too stressed one way or the other. I don't know if that's good or bad. Maybe it's bad, but my feeling was that they were not stressed at all, and they went into each game kind of riding their mood. If their mood was good, they played well. If their mood was kind of lackadaisical, it didn't look that good.
Mm.
They're always going to have enough talent to do something, but I saw a bit of a lapse back to a
Yes,
to a
agreed.
failure to set piece well, and it became too easy for teams if they wanted to beat Fiji to just go set piece,
Yeah, the
structure,
set piece
and
fell
win.
apart against Ireland, and it was tough
Yeah,
to watch.
and that was not fun to watch.
Yeah. Next up, we've got Italy. Now, I think Italy's a funny one because it feels like there's a lot to say about them, and there's not a lot to say about them. So 5-5 is their record. Best ever Six Nations. They lost to Samoa in the summer, and then they were kind of they ran the All Blacks close, but I felt like that game was more about the All Blacks than about Italy. They got run close by Georgia. A difficult team to get a read on at the moment. A year of two halves, I'd almost say.
Yeah, it is difficult to know. I have actually always wanted Italy to play more simply, to have a more simple structure, to play simple rugby. I have felt for a long time they don't kick enough or they don't kick at the right times. So we go to the Elegies book one, where Propertius is talking about simplicity and praising natural beauty. Quid luvat ornato procedere vita capio. The point there is you can overcomplicate, over sophisticate things and lose the beauty. But true beauty in rugby or in life, and he was talking about women, I think, is very natural. And I do think there's a part of Italian rugby that's probably going down the wrong. And I would say Italy should take a page out of Argentina. Like, still have the flair, still have all that pizzazz, but build structures that can stand up when you come against the big team. So yeah, it's to me, it's much of the same. It's been that way for about 3 or 4 years now, where there's kind of a big spurt. You kind of want things to happen, and then it just kind of comes back to a 50% team with some weak opponents.
Yeah, I do think that towards the end, because Casada came in and he had the Six Nations, which went very well, and I think since then he's gone, okay, now I'm going to start doing what I want to do, and I think it's gone a bit funny since then, but we'll
Yeah.
see. The acid test will be the Six Nations. Okay, then, right, come on. Here's the big one, the one we've all been waiting for. Wales, my team, 0-11 in 2024. The question is, what's the actual heck is going on here? I don't even, I can't think, what have I not already said about Wales? Harry, you're going to have to ask me the question because I don't know what to say at this point.
I'm not gonna pile upon your grief. John Morris Jones wrote, "Why, O wind against my window, come you grief to prove? Can I be your hearts gone grieving for us own lost love?" I'm worried that Wales is falling out of love with rugby. So my question to you is, does Wales stand at a precipice, where the dragon falls over the edge and we find the fossilized bones, or is there life still in the form of these young players, the loose forwards, Jack and Aaron, and the sheer talent? Can it rise again, or the youngsters in Wales turning to football or esports?
Michael Sheen had a great quote. I might not get this word for word, but it was something like Wales is like a dragon, powerful, mighty, fearsome, mythical. And that resonated with me quite a lot. And yes, to answer your question specifically, yes, kids in Wales are turning to football, and Welsh football is in a pomp at the moment. And the FAW, the Football Association in Wales, is much more in contact with its public than the WRU is, and they've aligned themselves politically to what's the word I'm looking for here? The a much stronger identity of Wales. They eschew the three feathers and things like that. Where is Wales at a precipice? Maybe, maybe, and sometimes I wonder, do Welsh people love rugby or do they love Wales? And
Yeah.
they'll go to the stadium, whether that's rugby being played or football being played. What they love and what they're cheering on is Wales and maybe not a sport or a team. And it's difficult and people will become disengaged. And do you know what? Something else that what my co-host on the women's rugby pod with Julia said to me was um in most cases it's the casuals become disengaged and the hardcores are left. In Wales it might be the other way around. It might be the hardcores who go, I'm not I'm not standing for this anymore, and it might just be the casuals that are left. I don't know. Wales does doom and gloom better than anybody. That's our MO. Even when things are going well, we find things to be doom and gloom about.
Yeah. Well,
It's
I thought the
very
results on
tough.
the field were abysmal, but the scandal, the double down scandal, I thought also was dispiriting. To your point about the dyed in the wool, strong believer fans, that had to be a gut punch. So I actually think you're right. I think it is precipice time, but the thing about precipices are, you haven't fallen off yet, so there's still
No,
some life.
and yeah, some of Gatland's former players, the ones that he picked quite a lot, have come out and like backed him or says that changing Gatland won't fix anything. I don't agree that it won't fix anything. I mean, if we stick specifically to the Welsh national team, that's a toxic environment at this point. And the first press conference of the Six Nations, if Gatland is still in post at that time, is not going to be a fun thing. And it's not going to be talking about the team that he selected. He's not going to be talking about his tactics. He's going to be talking about unpleasantness. So I think it is time for a change. It's sometimes a change is what is needed. But, it almost the Australia defeat was a kind of a moment in time, but in a way the Springboks defeat was in a way worse because there was nothing. It was a training run, it was a captain's run, it wasn't a test match in anything other than name. So well hopefully better times. Wales can bounce back. Historically, that's one thing that we've been able to do.
Yeah.
Georgia
It's a
then.
s- it's a
Sorry,
sad
go on.
story. Yeah,
It
let's
is a
go on
sad
to the happier story.
Yeah, so Georgia. Well, is Georgia a happier story? Because 7-4, but that is, as always, boosted by the Rugby Europe Championship. Is Georgia trapped in purgatory?
Yeah, to some extent, it's in an awkward up or out, if not up down, kind of almost like a struggling professor at a university that cannot get, department head or chair and doesn't publish anything. It just kind of sits there. Now, listen, Georgians are apparently famous poets. Not many of their poems have been translated into English, but here's one by Galaktion Tabitse, which is called Wind.
Hmm.
Blowing wind, leaves are swept along its path. Rows of trees, armies of trees bend and sway. Where are you? Where are you? Which is what your question was. They are a fighting nation, stubborn as hell, never give up, never give in. But it just feels like where are they is trapped in that construct. And I suppose it'll be when there's two or three playmaking Georgian rugby players that we come to know and love, the Capiozzo kind, the Malia kind. That's what's going to have to happen. And just one guy that plays for Lyon doesn't. It's not enough. There has to be a little trio or a cadre, I think. The other thing is they're also trapped because of systemic things where they're just good enough where they can beat everyone below them fairly easily, and not good enough where they can convincingly take on, number eight, number seven.
Hmm.
I think, I don't know what the solution is, but maybe more tournaments that feature Italy, Wales, Georgia, Fiji, and crunch them together, and maybe that's the way to iron sharpens iron. But I feel for Georgia because I feel like if they just had more of that, they would be just as good as Italy.
I see that. We could call it the CCC, the Climate Catastrophe Cup.
I like it.
So next up, speaking of climate catastrophe, next up we have Japan. So my question for you on Japan, who went 4-7 this year, and they played a lot of home. This doesn't include the games against the Maori All Blacks, by the way. My question for you on Japan is Eddie Jones getting away with it again?
Yes, Eddie Jones has been his best performances have been in the boardroom for 5, 6 years now. His final chapters at England were convincing people, that the emperor had clothes, preposterous, absurd reviews that made no sense. Lower body strength is our problem, or we didn't have enough time, or and then there were the Wallabies, and literally does everything opposite to what he says. And now he's landed in Japan. Look, it doesn't even matter. Japan's league is doing really well, but their test team has taken a huge step backward. I will now summon the poet Matsuo Basho, whose autumn haiku says thus: In the autumn night, breaking into a pleasant chat. It just doesn't seem to matter. Japan shows up, they run around, there's no pathos. They don't seem to really care that they're losing. They don't seem to care if they win. Eddie Jones, I'm not saying he's solo responsible for that, but something is going on there. It's just not driving excellence. Performance doesn't seem to be peaking at all. And they're struggling to beat teams that they should be handling.
Yes, I agree. And if you look at Japan, my point about Japan, and I keep making this till I'm blue in the face, what did Japan not have? They've got money. They've got plenty of money. They've got their domestic league is up there with the richest in the world.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Opportunity. They play everybody. Everybody, not only do they play everybody, everybody goes to Japan to play them. The All Blacks,
Yep.
England, you name it, they go there. Coaching. Look at the coaches they've got in the domestic league. Okay, maybe some of them are a bit long in the tooth, but it's
Robbie
become the
Deans.
thing. If you get
Yeah.
sacked from a test team, you go and you sit in Japan for a few years until someone else picks you up. Is how it's going at the moment. So they get the best coaches, players. They got half of the last World Cup final plays in Japan, so they've
Mm.
had the experience of being playing alongside them, playing against them. So how do they look so shocked when they play these test level teams? How do they look so unprepared? And yeah, it's just that Japan should be better for me, and I'm disappointed. And when Eddie Jones says, "Oh, we're building for a World Cup," what does that mean exactly? Are you going to win the World Cup in 2027? Is that what they're planning to do? Are they planning to get out of their pool to a round of 16 as we now have? Is that what this is for? Is that what these taking 50 points week after week is in need of? Is a round of 16?
Yeah.
I don't get it.
No one gets away with anything, we think they do, but Eddie Jones has been treating people in a lousy way for a long time, and I think it just all come back to roost. So even if he's not currently, being cruel or disgusting in his behavior, he just doesn't know how to be friendly, like legitimately, genuinely friendly to people. So I just think the thing is in a bad way. People talk about, well, how can you replace the coach? How will that change? It is the thing you change. The players actually change less. You have a core of players who are good enough. That's about it. Just like with Wales. It's the change at the top with your 4 or 5 assistant and head coaches that put a whole new spin on things. Look at the evidence of teams that have made come arounds and turnarounds. It came with coaching changes. Same player, even Etzebeth played with Alistair Coetzee, same guys, Peter Septitoy. So I do think Japan made a mistake. And they got done. But look, they shouldn't be too ashamed because Eddie's really good in the boardroom.
Yeah.
He's he's like the most amazing self-rapper.
Yeah. I the thing that I wanted to get out of this podcast was a haiku, and I've got that now, so I'm happy. Right. Last but one, Samoa. My question on Samoa, only 6 games. They cancelled their autumn tour for financial reasons. My question on Samoa is, would that Samoa has the opportunity, how good could they be?
So good. That's the one actually that I always wonder about. I've actually worked with Samoa to try to alleviate some of these money problems. And so I know very much of what I speak. Some of that is just sort of built into the country itself and from whence it comes, there's also exacerbation problems. There are corruption problems. There are people who have broken promises to players. There's a level of greed and avarice. So it's actually a very sad story. But if you actually harness that talent of Samoa and you were able to bring diaspora back, expats back, and you actually formed, that's a juggernaut. And no, it's sad. It's sad that we have a team here that's just really struggling to pay the bills and has to get money up front to even be able to do these things. The best writer on what it's like to lose money and not have money is George Orwell. You know, his book Down and Out, he takes you through what happens to you. Besides the complications and the hunger, he has this great line that it annihilates the future. So not only is Samoa in trouble now, it's hard to plot a road forward to 2027 where you could have those moments where it spikes. They're so far behind now that it's just hard to test rugby is where you get your money. Like
Mm.
almost every union, 80 to 85% of their money comes from these matches. And to cancel that entire autumn series because they couldn't front, it's really sad for the players.
Mm. Absolutely. And then finally, number 15 of 15, another team that I'm hoping, know a little bit about is the US Men's Eagles. So only 9 games, 4-5, but they did finish the year strongly with 3 from 3 on their European tour. So my question on the men's Eagles is, are they fixed? Can we relax ahead of 2031?
They're on a good pathway. So it's hard to see sometimes that just like where someone's falling off, sometimes it's hard to see that they were. It's on the up. So college, university, rugby is exploding. Club rugby is exploding. Here we should go to Walt Whitman, the great poet, Song of Myself. Do I contradict myself? Very well, then I contradict myself. I am large, I contain multitudes, which has always been read to not only be about Walt Whitman, but the country itself of America. People get so lost in debates about America. They go, oh, well, look, it's only penetrated 1 or 2%. You don't have to have a lot of penetration in a market the size of America with a city like Charlotte, North Carolina, or Portland, Oregon, or Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. All those cities are as big as the cities that support rugby for an entire nation. And if you have one of those cities falls in love with it, what happened is like women's soccer, women's football.
Mm.
They went to number one, two, and they perpetually, perennial top of the world with a tiny fraction of the country into that. It doesn't take much. If 350 million people and you have 1%, that's 3 million. That's Wales. So um
Exactly.
yeah, so
This Fiji is a country of 1 million people.
yeah, you just have to have some of these uh sort of cities that below, like in Oakland, California, as opposed to San Francisco, just cities that have 1 million people in them, and they're highly sports orientated, and they have a story that gets told. So I know test teams are really important avatars. The USA Eagles did really well. They finished up like the French. They kind of kept getting better and better. They took on their antagonists. They got their revenge against a number of teams that they had lost to. It was really important because they did it on the road.
Yeah.
They went to Europe and they won those matches. So they have good drivers, good game managers. The pack's getting better. That was actually always the problem, and that is the one area where the USA will get better in the next 2 or 3, 4 years. Is the pack? They're recruiting really top athletes from an earlier age, not trying to get NFL washouts or college football, American football failures. They're actually going to the source and convincing people. And so I think the Title IX, which is a rule in America, which says you have to spend equal amount of money on women's and men's sports at all levels all the time. Women's rugby is exploding, and women's rugby is producing stars like the women's soccer team that are ending up counterintuitively helping the men's budgets. So it's a strange tale, but we might see that women's rugby is the tail that wags the dog in America.
Yeah, that's so exciting. I'd love to do this same kind of chat about women's rugby at some point, but unfortunately, that'll have to wait for another day. We have reached a point in time where I have to say that this is now end of part one of this podcast. We will be going into part two now, or next week for the people at home, where we will be picking a World 15 with a twist, which I still haven't told Harry what it is. But Harry, you and I are going nowhere, but the people at home are leaving for now. So can I get from you a come play with us, please?
Come play with us.